All right, I have that it is 7 o'clock and we are live, so we will go ahead and call this meeting to order. Just a few reminders that since we are completely virtual, we will be doing roll call votes tonight, and I will also read through for our roll call to introduce everybody who's here tonight. Hopefully I've gotten everybody as you've come in, but if I've missed you, please let me know. So we'll start with roll call. Erica Price. Rocky Buznets. Rocky, are you here with us?
I am. Yeah, my screen froze just for a sec there.
Okay.
Present.
Rosa Cavazos.
Here.
Eric Teacher.
Here.
Renee Hansen.
Here.
Jason Schultz.
Present.
And I'm Lauren Tice Miller. And then we have Matt Hirsch.
Present.
And Tiffany Kench.
Here.
Stacy Giebler. You were here somewhere. Oh.
Here.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you, Stacy. Stacy Bell.
Here.
Jennifer Hill.
Here.
There you are. You guys are all over the screen, so I apologize. Joe Hobbs. I saw you on here. Becky Hummer.
Here.
Sarah Hoyer.
Here.
Kristen O'Brien. Did I see you? She may have hopped up for a second. Okay. Tim Urich.
Here.
Ed West.
Here.
Blair Anderson.
Here.
And I think I saw Sherry Monholland.
Correct.
And it looks like Scott Dial just joined us as well. He's down in the corner. Did I miss anybody? All right. All right, moving on to approval of the agenda and minutes.
Jason moves approval.
I have a motion by
Rocky
Jason
second.
and a second by Rocky. We'll do a roll call vote. Rocky Buznets.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos.
Rosa, yes.
Eric Deecher.
Eric, yes.
Renee Hansen.
Renee, yes.
Erica Price.
Erica, yes.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, I.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a yes for a 7-0 vote. Moving on to communications, presentation from Schneider Electric.
I've got Peter Hinkle here and Drew, what's Drew's last name? Drew Sebelius here from Schneider Electric to talk to us about the facilities master plan and the project we're currently doing with them on our lighting project. So I'll turn it over to Peter.
Perfect. Is it all right if I try? I'm gonna try to share my screen, so hopefully we don't break the internet. But where it says host disabled participant screen sharing, I don't know how I do that exactly.
There should be a button down low. Can you see screen share by the chat button?
Yeah.
If you
I hit that and it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
try it now.
You must be privileged.
There you go. That's, well, story of my life, let me tell you. Let's see. Screen two. There we go. All right, can everybody see the start? I'll go into screen mode or display mode here. Can everybody see this?
No, we're not seeing it.
Negative.
Okay. Share. There we go. How's that?
Ding.
Yeah, we got it now.
Perfect. Well, guys, first of all, we appreciate working with you all over the last phase and really kind of starting off what we hope is a long-term partnership with the district moving forward. To date, we've completed the bulk of the work. We'll finish up and wrap up this project here after the first of the year. And we'll give some highlights kind of on that project, kind of what we're doing to close it out, and then also talk about the facilities master plan and start to think about creating this kind of long-term and short-term capital plan for the remaining district facilities that maybe didn't go untouched necessarily, but didn't have large capital investment put into some of their facility needs and their infrastructure needs. I've got Drew Sebelius here, and I don't know if you guys remember us when we were allowed to see each other in person, but Drew is my project development manager. He worked with me throughout the development of the project, and as well as kind of continued on for any kind of engineering needs that we have kind of on the back end as we're in the process of construction. From a project perspective, this phase one, it really was centered around a large capital need at Tecumseh North. If you remember, they had a lot of the equipment there, mainly on the cooling side, had started to fail. It had been in kind of an O&M and operations and maintenance disrepair for several years. And Jacob and Nathan, or Joe and Nathan, worked really hard to, maintain it as best they could. But a lot of that equipment over there had just kind of hit its end of its useful life. And so with this first phase, we were able to include a large piece of the cooling equipment being replaced, as well as addressing needs at other facilities. And I'll have Drew kind of touch on that here for just a second and give you kind of a recap of what we've done and where we're at. Drew?
Yeah, and I'll be brief, but please pause me if you have any questions. Just as a reminder, a cursory overview of the scope of work included, like Peter mentioned, the cooling on the north half of Tecumseh North was really the focus. Like Peter mentioned, aging equipment beyond its useful life, causing annual maintenance headaches for both Joe and Nathan and their team. So targeted that as a primary replacement for this first phase of the scope of work. Moving kind of left to right there, the building automation system is really just kind of the thermostatic control system. As a reminder there, we upgraded servers, we modified graphics. Really the intent of this scope of work is to really increase kind of productivity, troubleshooting capabilities, as well as kind of maximize energy efficiency while maintaining proper comfort in the classroom space. Really trying to improve that learning environment. That was kind of the building automation system. At the bottom left there, LED lighting replacement and controls. This was really, the largest single scope of work. And you can see why. This is replacing every single light across district facilities. Nearly 10,000 total fixtures on the inside and outside of the buildings converted to LED. There's the obvious energy savings that we are able to garner through that measure, but there's also kind of the operational benefit of doing that, along with the change out of lights to LED. There also came, for about half of those fixtures, are going to get or have been getting lighting control, which includes dimming in the classroom as well as occupancy control. And as well as kind of addressing the stadium lighting too. Those were outdated metal halides that were now converted to LEDs. So across the district, you're virtually an entirely LED district. And the last scope of work there is just building envelope, just kind of tightening up the outsides of the buildings. You're paying so much to condition what's in your buildings, might as well make sure you keep it in there. So this is just kind of weather stripping, replacing door sweeps, and those types of measures, kind of the low-hanging fruit. Those are the four primary scopes of work. Any questions, or Peter?
One thing I'll say just on the LED lighting scope, I think that a lot of times it's overlooked to some degree, right? It's upgrading of light. I mean, it's nice, it's good, it's more energy efficient. Really what we did here is I think we changed how these classrooms are able to be used. I was in a couple of the buildings over the past couple of weeks, and I talked to just a couple of teachers randomly and just asked them what the experience was like. And I think overwhelmingly, at least the two that I talked to, I'll say overwhelmingly, I was 2 for 2 on finding ones that liked it. But I mean, their comments were, it allowed them to now shut down part of their class from a lights perspective. Maybe that allows them to see a screen better up on the wall, or, it just allows them to have a better learning environment, whatever that might entail at the time that it entails it. So I think from that aspect, we talk about LEDs as a great efficiency measure. But I think the investment that you all made in that one improvement inside the classroom is really where I think you're going to see the greatest benefit. The other items obviously are things that are need to have and need to be done. But again, I think out of all of them, I think the lighting is probably the biggest impact, as well as probably the one thing that from a community standpoint that most people see is what are those funky things sitting up around our football stadium. So those are the kind of things and the impacts that we know are being made on the community. And as we start to wrap this up, our approach is going to be, how do we continue to get the message out to, not just folks who are coming to a football game, but everybody within the district, as far as what you've been able to do, as well as what that really means for you long-term in terms of savings and being able to realize those savings as well. Any specific questions on scope by anybody? So kind of moving on, the value of the project. So when we talk about kind of the total cost up there on the right-hand side, the real value is how this kind of played out over time in terms of net savings versus net investment. And so this first phase of work that we really started to develop was centered on what cost savings measures can we help to implement that will allow the district to, from a financial perspective, gain a return from making that investment. It's just like anything else. It's a lot of these infrastructure improvements. We're trying to find a way that we can extract value out, whether that's, the O&M side in terms of costs that Joe and Nathan are telling us they're spending on an annualized basis on Tecumseh North's equipment, or it's lighting and reducing down the number of kilowatt hours that you use on an annualized basis, and how that kind of converts over into cost savings across the board. And so when you look at this graph, a few of the things that are obviously pretty prevalent are just the amount of savings in year one. And then if you look kind of in that bottom right-hand corner, I think the nice part for you all is that net savings over a 20-year lifespan. The equipment that we installed is all 15, 20, 25 years, depending upon kind of the different scopes. And so when you look at it from that perspective, not only are you getting good useful life out of that equipment that was put in, but you're also going to see a return that's going to actually be net positive for you over that lifespan as well. And so this kind of gives you a sense of how we approached and what we did on that first phase from a construction standpoint. Now what we're really starting to move into, and we're really starting to talk about, is as we transition out of construction, it's going to be into what we call our Performance Assurance Support Specialist group. We're actually going to have some additional meetings with Joe and with Matt and with Nathan and the administration team. But it might be worth, providing you guys kind of just some updated information here after the first of the year as we start to transition. But that team is really focused on back-end support. So they work with Joe, for example, if he can't get into a control system or he's having trouble navigating something or an issue within his facilities. That kind of act as an extra set of eyes. In addition to that, they also measure and guarantee your savings. So they oversee on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, and annual basis, giving you all updates in terms of how the savings is kind of being seen. And so really the value here is not only are you going to see the savings, but the Shawnee Electric actually financially guarantees and backs them up. And so we're able to then make sure that you're getting that return. But at the same time, we're also able to support folks like Joe and make sure that if he has any needs that he can't figure out on his own or that he just needs support on, a lot of these are just small technical issues. He gets on a phone call with one of our team members or they come out to support him. It's really kind of a win-win because we're able to still see our performance being met from a savings perspective, but he's now able to get into his buildings and solve some of those small problems that we can certainly help him to tackle. And so that's kind of in a nutshell where we are with phase one. Again, I'll open it up if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, we'll dive right into the facilities master plan and kind of give you the highlights of what you saw in that very long booklet. I hope you all read it page for page, but any questions? Okay. So facilities master plan, the fun part of the discussion tonight. And I hope that you guys chime in and feel free to stop us if we get rolling. But the concept of the facilities master plan was really part of our phase one and figuring out kind of the bigger picture for the district. What is it going to take to allow Shawnee Heights in general to be, a world-class school district in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And what we did already is great, right? It sets the foundation. It starts to have a centralized control system so that Joe and his staff can manage and Nathan can manage the buildings appropriately. It alleviates some deferred maintenance from a lighting perspective and building envelope, and even upgrading in terms of some capital investments with regards to the work that was done at Tecumseh North. But I think what we really were set out to do and what we worked with the previous superintendent on, and obviously Matt and the team now is, well, where are you now? What's the current state of the infrastructure that you have? And really, what's the next step in terms of what do you need to invest in? And so that big document, that big book, which I also have a copy of as well, So I've also read through it. I know it's painful sometimes. It's that long, but I think there's a ton of information in there that I think is really important for you all to understand both where it came from, but also kind of understand how we envision kind of a process moving forward and helping you to help kind of prioritize a lot of the different needs that are in there. So when it comes to the approach, you kind of see that picture of the district. You're a larger, more spread out geographical district from just where these buildings are located. And so the first thing for us is let's identify and collect as much information as we can and try to pinpoint what are those problems at each building. And so you'll notice inside the book, we broke it down building by building and even scope by scope. So that kind of gives you a good overview of what's the current state of each facility, and then what is also, some general ideas or thoughts in terms of solutions that we would take with mechanical systems, with any building automation systems that might be left. And then it kind of gives you a nice overview in terms of the back, in terms of the actual current state and listing out all of the equipment that you have within the space. So we did that through information collection. We walked the sites. We spent a lot of time from an engineering perspective, just being inside the facilities. And then we really looked at it from a scope and a solutions development perspective, and kind of did a couple different iterations, working with Nathan and with Joe and with Matt on, okay, is this what you're thinking? Okay, we need to add IT in here. We need to make sure we've got parking lots in there. And so we kind of rolled all this together here over the past month, which was a lot of work by them and a lot of work by us to make sure that we're hitting all the right points. But really, I think what we came out with was a great representation of kind of some direction that we would try to give the district. In terms of kind of specific areas of focus, I might have Drew talk a little bit about kind of what him and his engineering team saw, and then we'll even get into kind of showing you an example on the next slide of some, how we set it up and how the actual document can be used. Drew?
Yeah, so Peter really did a good job laying the foundation for kind of what we did from an analysis perspective, but we examined mechanical, electrical systems at each building. Again, from a building automation standpoint, we brought a lot of the smarts up to speed, but a lot of the parts need to kind of come with it too. They're outdated and over time need to be replaced. As you would expect, a lot of technology just is the quickest to kind of go out of date. So those need to be updated. Building envelope, we address a lot of the low-hanging fruit. There's a couple of larger capital items like window replacement that need to be addressed in a couple of areas. Roofing repairs and replacement, really there's only a handful of those spots. Really the district has done an awesome job of staying on top of that. Parking lots is an area that does need to be addressed in several spaces. You can see in that picture on the right there, the middle school has a lot of spider webbing going on there. Needs to be that's probably the biggest priority from a parking lot standpoint. And then finally, kind of working with Blair Anderson and the IT department, as well as kind of building security as well. There's several measures that we kind of examined along with him and his team. So those are all included in a separate section as well. But several different categories that we kind of assess top to bottom. And on the next slide, I'm going to dive into the first area in a little bit more depth, because there's a lot of meat around this specific category. And this is the mechanical and electrical equipment. These two specific examples on the screen are both from Tecumseh South Elementary School. And what we've done on the left here with mechanical or HVAC equipment is kind of color coded it for ease of interpretation, right? So green means you're good. Typically that HVAC is 5 years old or less. Yellow is maybe in the range of 9 to 15. It's still got some life left on it. Where red is 15 years or older. And the way that we did this was based on ASHRAE's expectancy of life for typical equipment. For many of the pieces of equipment, 15 to 20 years would be about what you could expect for a standard piece of a split system or a rooftop unit, where maybe more like boilers could last 20 to 25 years. So we've kind of kept all of that in mind, but for each school, we've given you a color-coded map of, what are the zones that you need to keep in mind for immediate replacement, and as well as midterm and long-term replacement. And that's going to be kind of reflected in the scope of work that we developed, as well as the costs, and whether or not we lumped it into a short-term priority or a long-term item. We did the same thing for electrical equipment. You think about it, schools get added on multiple times. Many times they're getting their own electrical service. So just kind of wanted to help outline where those services exist and whether or not they need to be addressed in the near future. Oftentimes you could get 50 years of life or more. I wouldn't lie to you by saying I've been into schools that have 100-year-old equipment, but it's, again, kind of industry standards that maybe once you get to about 50 years of life, you should start thinking potentially proactively to upgrade that switch gear. It's probably getting to the point where it's difficult to find replacement parts, and you might as well just assess kind of a full system replacement at that point. So these are kind of two very specific examples of a lot of the content within that report. And again, this is provided per building at every location. Peter?
Thanks, Drew.
Yep.
So when you start to break it down, and this kind of gives you a sense, and if you're looking for kind of where this information, that scope and cost estimate section number 2, gives you a nice overview, and it even breaks down each one of these scopes. You'll see ME 1 through 28. So there's 28 different items that we identified that were what we would consider a mechanical or electrical scope item. BAS, building automation systems, so forth and so on. Each one of those are broken down by scope and also by building. So it gives you a kind of a nice overview in this screenshot, but also gives you a nice detailed overview as you kind of break down those specific, what we would call energy conservation measures or facility improvement measures. You can kind of see where each one of those projects kind of align, and as well as that building and information technology and life safety, that kind of got its own separate bottom part as that was kind of added in after we had created that original spreadsheet. But when you look at it, the bulk of your costs are really coming from those upgrades on the mechanical side and the building automation side, as well as the other big one probably that you notice is going to be the parking lot in the near term. When you add that all up, you've got that $12 million or so. And again, I want to kind of reiterate, these are estimates at this point. We haven't finalized design. We haven't taken this out to bid, but this just gives you a sense of what our team believes is going to be kind of the net cost for you all and what we're referring to as near-term issues. And again, some of them are going to be things that maybe we can work with Joe and with Nathan on and build into the CIP, but some of them are also larger, full-scale replacement of systems. So it's not just replacing one unit here or one unit there. It might be looking at how is the system, and I'll kind of even revert back to this screen that we were just on. How are we using the system that we have in place? Are we going back with a one-for-one replacement? Is there a better solution? If one-for-one's a solution, how do we maybe bundle this all up? And part of that is really kind of working with you all to figure out what's the right funding mechanism and the right approach when it comes to these projects. But as you can see, we've identified about $20 million or so worth of overall potential issues within the district. Some of them, are 10 to 15 years out if you look at that more longer term column, but certainly some of them are much more prevalent and probably within that 5 years replacement cycle. And so when it comes to, the where we're involved in this process, what we'd really like to do is, and we've talked with Matt a little bit about this, is kind of start that plan of well, what is the next funding or what's the next project look like, the next phase of work? How do we prioritize that? Certainly kind of thinking about this long term and what is the right funding mechanism. I know we've talked a little bit about a bond, I think at the March meeting when we came in and presented on our first phase of work. Our first phase of work was done, which called a lease purchase, which is basically a tax exempt lease for the scopes that we implement in phase 1. The next phase, maybe that's an option, or if we look at a bond issuance, obviously it would come a couple years down the road. It's just a matter of working with you all to establish what that looks like. The other piece that we're really looking to do, and this is something that as we start to wrap up this project, we'd like to kind of create a highlight video for you all, something we can include on your website that talks a lot about the project, but it really talks about you all and the impact that it's made, interviewing maybe a couple teachers and some building principals, but really talking about what has phase 1 done for the district from an investment standpoint, and highlighting kind of how it's done that, how it's impacted the learning environments from a student's perspective as well, not just a financial impact. So, from that, I'll open it up to questions, look for any thoughts, anything you guys want to kind of throw at us or just discussion points. Otherwise, we'll get off your Zoom and we'll let you guys have your meeting back, I guess.
What projects would qualify for the same route we took with the lighting and LED stuff? I know there's certain things they have to have a payback, right? And in order to do that lease purchase type of financing and agreement.
Yeah,
and
so
which ones have-
the projects really kind of fall into the 30-year payback in the state of Kansas, and so we can look at that and identify which one of those and prioritize that for maybe another phase with lease purchase if that's the way you want to go, or we can look at how we can bundle some of those additional controls projects. I know that we've talked with Joe and with Nathan about because there's some buildings we just didn't touch, maybe including those in a future phase, getting some savings out of those facilities as well. But I can't speak to like line item by line item which ones necessarily would fall inside of that at this point in time. But we can certainly prioritize that as kind of the next evolution of this document.
As a general statement, though, I think we could make the conjecture that building automation system would have a little bit better savings. A couple of select mechanical items would have some decent savings to them, but as Peter mentioned, a lot of these are largely capital items that are not going to have great paybacks.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, I think doesn't look like any questions, Peter and Drew. Thanks
Perfect.
for your time. Appreciate you coming out.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Having us.
Lauren, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
There, we got you.
Okay. We've got the Tecumseh South Elementary Site Council report.
So I think I need to be made host again.
You should be able to share your screen.
All right. Give me 1 second. Okay, can you guys all see that? Okay. So in the years past, I believe some of what Site Council has reported to you is some state assessment results and MAP Gold results, but we don't have that from last year. So this year, Site Council, we've talked a lot about what we're all going through right now, and so we thought we'd create a video to present for you, and then afterwards we can talk about any questions that you might have.
Is there supposed to be sound, Jennifer?
Yeah. You not have any sound, Matt?
Any sound?
All right, let's see if we can figure out how to get you some sound.
You might have to change it from your headphone to the computer.
Presented
There we go.
by Jennifer Hill.
Okay.
Welcome to the Site Council report from Tecumseh South, presented by Jennifer Hill. Site Council this year has spent a lot of time talking about COVID and how COVID has changed us. And from the very beginning, it changed us even before school started. Teachers have always had an open house where parents and students could come and meet the teacher and see where their classroom was. But this year we had to do that all virtually. So teachers took pictures of themselves in their classroom and sent it out to their students via Facebook. In addition, we have partitions in our classroom and social distancing going on. And of course, those mask wearing, but you can see here that there's still a lot of fun happening in school. And even though COVID has changed us, it was really important to Site Council that we still continue with our strong traditions. So some of those are Crazy Hair Day, which has always been a school favorite. We also had Pajama Day. And these were during our hybrid days, so we got to do those twice a week. And we even threw in Kona Ice twice a week as well. And even though Mr. Dial is at central office this year, we have still continued the tradition of supporting our chiefs, partly due to Randall. And we also just had our Veterans Day celebration, which was amazing. And with those traditions, we've also managed to sprinkle in a few new things as well. We just had an election, and to give our students some voting experiences, we've had some voting in some classrooms. We also have wellness checks monthly provided by our counselor. We've added in our interviews by Randall. And we have a positive office referral system where students get to come in, call their parents, and get their photo taken. Our most recent addition has been our One School, One Book, where every student gets a book and we're all reading the same book together as a whole. And all of those traditions and new things continue to grow and strengthen Tecumseh South, even in the face of COVID. Thanks for watching.
All right. So that should give you a little bit of idea of some things that have been going on at Tecumseh South. Are there any questions that I can answer about things that happened last year or anything that's going on this year?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much. That was a great video. Do I have audio? Can you hear me now? Okay. Perfect. All right, we will move on to item C, middle school, high school survey results.
Okay, let me. All right, our last board meeting requested that I survey middle school, high school parents, students, and staff. And so we have done that. We're looking at just kind of direction for future learning options at the high school and middle school. We got those surveys out last week, and I think I shared with you as a board the entire packet of that. I'm just going to highlight some things. I noticed some of the questions I sent you weren't complete. Google Forms did not send the complete question for some reason, so my apologies on that. Some survey highlights from the high school. We asked all our groups their satisfaction with the current learning scenario. We thought it was important to see where we're as far as overall satisfaction with what we're doing right now. We're doing hybrid learning at both high school and middle school, and we're bringing in some extra students that are having some struggles in the classroom to give them some extra time. So the surveys came out real well. The staff was very positive about hybrid. Parents and students were also on the positive side for hybrid. Students themselves were 70% positive on it. So it looks like things are going well in general as where we are right now. Second question, wanted to know what their comfort level was with coming back completely to what we would call normal school. If we had a 4-day school like it used to be in the past, it would not have social distancing in the classroom or in the lunchroom. What's their comfort level with that? You can see staff is very uncomfortable, which is understandable. We've talked about how high school students are very similar in COVID to adults. And so they're, I think, appreciating the social distancing they have at the hybrid. Parents are split pretty evenly on comfort level with that. Students were the only group that actually came out on the positive side on comfort level. But the parents and students were fairly split on that. So how comfortable are they with a 4-day on-site scenario? We gave them a couple scenarios for 4-day on-site. One had a moderate reduction in elective choices. In order to get more kids on campus, we have to find ways to spread them out better. And so one of the options was to take some of our electives, and especially the core areas, reduce them completely so that those teachers could pick up extra kids in more of the core classes. In this case, social distancing would not be able to occur in all classes. It may occur in some, but definitely not in all. The comfort level with that, staff, again, was about 70% uncomfortable with that. Parents and students both fell on the positive side, but again, it was fairly split there. Not a big difference in that. The next option, I'll leave both on the screen there so you can see them, was to try to maximize the social distancing possibilities while bringing all kids back. There's no way at the high school you can totally social distance with all kids in the building. It just isn't going to work. So in order to maximize that, we'd have to do some major changes in electives. We'd have to do some major things as far as trying to get kids in the building by spreading them out the most we can possibly spread them. But that's going to really reduce electives. And it's also going to make it so some electives that are currently being offered are not offered anymore. Some may be, if you had year-long electives, you have to take them away. Overall, there was not a comfort level with that at all. So that was not a popular choice amongst any of the groups. We kind of asked second semester, if you had those options that we just talked about, along with full remote learning, what would you pick? You can see the groups here. Staff was overwhelmingly interested in staying where they were at the hybrid. Parents were split, but their two major ones were either to stay with hybrid or to go back to totally normal school as their two main options. Students were also on that same page. Those were their two favorite options, to either have 4-day normal school or to be in hybrid. We asked a couple of bus questions. Their comfort level with riding a bus with other students. Right now, busing is totally social distance. You can only have one student in a seat unless they are part of the family situation. About 50% parents and students are not interested in that. So half comfortable, half uncomfortable. So it's a fairly even split. We asked them if they were able to transport their students or if the students could get here. About 77 to 81% said yes on that. So it looks like for the high school, a large majority could get here without having to ride the bus, which could benefit us on some options coming up in the future if we can't put them on buses. Going on to the middle school survey, broke it down similarly. Comfort level with hybrid as it is right now. You can see staff, much like the high school, was very comfortable with what we're doing right now. The parents were about 68 to 70% positive on that. The students were the only group that came out on the uncomfortable side. It's important to note Mr. Urick made the student survey, didn't match up question for question like the high school 3 surveys did. So I had to take it from another question he'd asked. And the second option on his question was, would you rather do 4-day school? And so what this question for the students was really asking was 44% liked hybrid, 56% of them would rather be in a 4-day school as what was comfort level. So they were more interested in going 4 days a week. We asked them how interested they were in a 4-day normal school, just like we did at the high school. Staff, 73% uncomfortable. Parents were evenly split on that, 50-50. The students were the one group, as we saw above, they had more interest in that, and they also had more interest in that with this one. Second semester, what would their choice be if we gave them 4 different options, one being hybrid as we were doing, one being a 4-day called normal school, one a 4-day with cohort groups. Cohorting at the middle school would basically mean that students stay in one classroom of kids, so they may have 25 of their closest friends in there with them, and they would be with those kids all day. They would change classes, but they would stay with that same class the entire time. It would cause a reduction in elective options because we'd have to offer the same elective to each class, and so that would reduce their options on electives. Choices that came up, a staff again was interested in the hybrid. Parents had fairly even split with hybrid, 4-day normal and 4-day on site, with the 4-day ones being their 60% of their options were in that 4-day options. Students, they had 2 different questions, and both of them came up with a 4-day normal school being their preferred option on that. Comfort level with them riding the bus. Again, parents are much like the high school, fairly even split there on comfort level. Not as many middle school parents can get their kids to school. Obviously, their kids can't drive, so it takes that option away from them. So about half of them felt like they could get their kids here if need be. Some general conclusions from this part of the survey. In general, it looked like everybody was okay, from parents, students, teachers, with what we're doing with hybrid. In general, that was a very positive result of us maintaining where we are and just providing some extra supports for struggling students. At the high school, parents and students are split on options for reducing electives and social distancing. There's no clear consensus on that as far as what they liked as far as options to bring kids back for 4 days. Reducing electives and social distancing was pretty even split amongst them. High school students and parents had 60% of them preferred either hybrid or normal school. Remember, there were about 30% for each of those. Teachers were preferring the hybrid. So if I had to make a kind of an input from the whole group, doing either hybrid, hybrid was the one that was preferred most by every group. But then normal school was the other option that was preferred with students and parents. Students and parents had a 50-50 split at the middle school on the idea of cohort groups. So that staff was not in favor of cohort groups. And so cohorts group was kind of a mixed result on that also. At the middle school, 60% of parents and students preferred the 4-day option. 80% of staff preferred hybrid option. And then at both buildings, parents were about 50% comfortable with increasing bus capacity. So with that information, kind of where we're at is first I'll open it up for questions from the group before we say where are we going to go with this. So anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you guys for putting all the effort and work in that. It's pretty comprehensive and a lot of good information there. So just appreciate everybody's work. I know it wasn't just you, Matt. I know you had to bug a lot of people to get it done. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Matt, can you remind us on the option where we would reduce some of the electives at the middle school and high school level? Can you remind me what those electives would be reduced? I think you may have mentioned at one point band and orchestra, but I can't remember.
Mr. West, I'm going to let you answer for the high school side. We're reducing electives there. I think initially we started out with, I'm not sure if I think he's frozen on my screen. Are you there? Oh, there.
Yeah, I'm here.
What ones were we reducing at the high school?
So for Ms. Heitzmiller, you're talking about the moderate one, not the major reductions, but the moderate one?
Yeah, the moderate one that would
Yeah,
allow us some social distancing, but
Right.
not.
So basically what we would, some of our classes are socially distanced, just, the nature of the class itself doesn't lend to large enrollment. Some of our career and tech ed classes, for example, are that way, which is why we get additional funding for those. Specifically in terms of this proposal or option for you guys to consider, we take a lot of our elective classes that are offered within the core content areas. So in English, think of mythology or lit and film or sports literature. ACT prep is taught by one of our English teachers. In science, zoology would be an example of that. Math, it might be our math mastery classes, at least reducing, if not completely eliminating those. And that allows us to create more sections of junior English, senior English, the kind of the generic courses that every student takes, integrated math 3, biology. We could offer more sections of those. And currently those classes right now are about 22, 23 strong. Of course, they're divided in half. But it would allow us to get closer to that number 16. 16 is kind of the most common number for our classrooms in which we can house students in a socially distanced format. So that's kind of in that moderate one that would allow us to get close. Well, where we could not do that in terms of that situation would be in some of the areas like foreign language. You take all of our Spanish, for example, we have an FTE of close to a little over 3 or close to 3, about 2.5 FTE in Spanish. All of those sections have about 23, 24 students in them. And again, right now they're divided in half. But if you would go to a 4-day week, there's no way to separate those kids into additional sections. We can't create additional sections. There's nowhere to pull from. So those would be an example of classes that would be well above 16 student limit in terms of social distancing. Have not really considered the band and the orchestra weights in some of those situations. I'm confident that we could break those groups up and come close to socially distancing in terms of the spaces and the number of staff that we have available. It would look different, but it would be doable. But again, that moderate would mostly be, as Mr. Hirsch said, those elective classes that are taught within the core areas.
Thank you.
Were you wanting that for the middle school also, Lauren?
Yeah.
Tim, you
please.
got the answer on that one?
Oh, the middle school has a different type of master schedule than the high school. It wouldn't look like a reduction in electives in the same way as it would at the high school. What it would look like is students being assigned electives. Some of these students may not have taken the prerequisite for the elective. Some students may have already taken the elective. We would also have to terminate participation in some electives. So it might be that on one of the 7th grade teams, because the students have to cohort together and stay together, I would assign one of the teams Spanish, computers, and robotics. And if those students have already taken those classes, they would take them again. Cohorting does break year-long electives, such as our foreign language classes. And so a student may take the first semester, but may not be able to take the second semester. Band and orchestra participation may be affected depending on what we decide to do at the elementary levels and the high school levels to social distance. The other impact would be with our accelerated math program. If the students cohort and they're with the same peers all day long, we can't have a section of honors math on each team in the 7th and 8th grade anymore. So those students could likely remain in the accelerated math program, but they would be mixed in with honors 7 and regular math 7 and math 8 students, and they would be taking their coursework online from the teacher.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? So part of the reason that, obviously most of the reason for doing this was to kind of help see if we wanted to give some direction to our middle school and high school principals about prepping for second semester. we can either kind of stay, we obviously saw that there is interest and things are going pretty good with the current hybrid. Do we want to stick with that option until we can go back into full in, which is one of the popular choices amongst families and kids, or do we want to try to create either these hybrid, not hybrid, but cohort groups and reduced elective options to try to come up with some different scenarios at the high school and middle school? Any thoughts on that from the group?
I have a lot of concerns with kind of shifting gears with the electives and stuff. I mean, especially for some of our 8th graders who I know are taking foreign languages in anticipation of being able to move up when they become freshmen in high school, and even some of our seniors. I can't imagine if some of our seniors had plans to take zoology or something else for their second semester, and then they wouldn't have that opportunity. So I have concerns that we would be limiting those opportunities for those students, and I don't want to see that, especially when there's clear support for maintaining the social distancing and the hybrid. So my preference would be just to continue forward with the hybrid until hopefully maybe next spring it'll be a little safer and maybe we can make adjustments then.
Is there any opposition to Lauren's thoughts out there from the rest of the group?
I just wanted to say I am in the same thought pattern that we should kind of stay the course right now until we get through whatever it is we're going to have to get through here.
I agree. I'm not a fan of cohorting at the middle school. Middle school and high school is about the electives, and I'm not in favor of taking those away.
I would agree with Erica on that. Oh, I don't want to see opportunities taken away from the kids. So,
Well,
and then with the explosion of numbers this past 2 weeks here, now would not be the right time to be pushing for 4-day-a-week classes.
you're not going to get much argument from me out of it either.
So it's sounding like we'll initially, number one, stay the course with hybrid for now, but also as we look at second semester, not make any major plans for overhauling the master schedule at this time. So, all right, that's what we were needing. I appreciate the input there.
Yeah, well, let me just clarify in regards to, we're talking second semester, I support the hybrid. So that's not what I support at this point. We just talked about the second semester is what I would support the comments that were made.
Yeah, that's what I meant, is for second semester, not making any changes so that our students can plan based on the electives that are available.
Yep. So we won't do any major, the concern was trying to redo the whole master schedule again. We're just not going to mess with it at this time. And right now we'll see where it goes. Okay, thank you.
All right, we are now moving on to comments, concerns from patrons. We did ask anyone to submit comments via email, and they were sent to Sarah. Sarah has forwarded them to us, and by my count, there were about 10 emails forwarded to us. And then I had actually, and I think we were all on these emails, I was going through my inbox. I have that we've received a total of 25, 10 from Sarah that were forwarded to us just today. And then we had a total of about 15 that have been sent to us since last Friday. And so we've all had an opportunity to read them. And so thank you everybody for submitting those. And I believe the concerns will be addressed later in our meeting. We'll move on to action items, business by consent.
Jason moves for approval.
I second Renee.
I've got a motion by Jason and a second by Renee. We will go to a roll call vote. I don't see any comments. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos.
Rosa, yes.
Eric Deecher.
Eric, yes.
Renee Hansen.
Renee, yes.
Erica Price.
Erica, yes.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, I.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a yes for a 7-0 vote. Moving on to item B, USD 450 learning scenario movement.
Get my screen back up again. Okay, as we're looking at the learning scenario movement for this week, there are a lot of moving parts on this and a lot of things to think about. Probably one of the most, I guess, difficult decisions I've had to try to sort through as far as how to reason through it a little bit with this one for this week. So I've got a lot of stuff I'm going to kind of present initially to kind of set the table and then go into what a recommendation is going to be. First one was really just that staff survey we did. I think it's important to note the two things we kind of learned from it that kind of relate to this was one, the current hybrid learning scenario. When we went through all the different groups on the survey, and it was a very positive result. Things seems to be positive. People, as far as the middle school and high school, this survey was sent out the week that we had the first scorecard that came out in the red for the county, and staff and parents and kids were all very positive about what we were doing with the current hybrid. So that was good to see. And the second one was the choice for second semester. We saw that very small amounts were picking the full remote option. So their choice is still, even amongst the staff and parents and kids, is to be in school as much as possible. So those are the first two things I kind of wanted to note. The next step of this is looking at just some data. First was, get that off, there we go. Positive cases in the district. Let me go up top here. Let's do it. Here we go. So positive cases in the district. Here is a graph that shows all our positive cases since we've started in tracking this in August. So you can see each week how many cases we had of positive results. And you can see the last 2 weeks here have been our biggest, but not substantially crazy compared to anything else. So our biggest one before that was 5. After that, we had 4. Then we've got 9 and 10 consistently has been the last 2 weeks. So definitely up on cases. But if you look at 6 school buildings, not an abnormal number, I wouldn't think, not something that's overwhelming us in any way. 35 total cases for the year. You look at quarantines for those same weeks. I'll try to leave both of those up on the screen there. You can see how they match up. So for each case, you can just go up and down and see the quarantines for that week also. Quarantines have been the major increase across the district. And that is basically based off of what we're seeing in the county. The county, the last couple of weeks, the cases have gone up, and I'll show you a graphic with that coming up. But our quarantines have been way up. The important thing to know about our quarantines is actually almost all of these are due to outside close contact. So these people have somebody outside of the school setting that they have been a close contact with, and as a result, they're being quarantined because of that. So almost all ours are that way. We have a few in building that maybe we had a student in a classroom that we had to quarantine some people, or a staff member that was around another staff member had to be quarantined, but very few overall. If we're looking at positive cases amongst the different groupings, so we have staff, elementary students, middle school students, high school students. I thought it was important to kind of break that down a little bit. We've been talking about how in the county they modified the quarantine rule for middle school and elementary students. So if you're a close contact of another student in the middle school or elementary, but you're both wearing masks, they're not going to be quarantining everybody as long as they're following that mask rule. Whereas the high school, you have to not only follow the mask rule, but you have to follow the social distance rule, 6 feet. But if you look at quarantines for each week across the board, you can see staff has done a great job. This last week, we've had our highest number of staff at 7 across the district. So 13 total staff have been positive cases. We've had 5 elementary students since we've started, 4 middle school students, and 13 high school students. So again, not overwhelming numbers, but they're definitely increasing here in this last week, as far as our numbers are, last 2 weeks. And then the visual of that, what it looks like across the board. So that's the first thing. Second thing, so we're comfortable with hybrid in general. People want to be in school, and our cases are right now under control, other than we're experiencing a lot of quarantines. The concern with the quarantines would be staffing. Can we keep staffing up? Right now, we're keeping up on it, doing a good job, but you never know when you might have an extra person gone, you can't get a sub for or something like that in the classroom. So we're continually monitoring that. Some other information, there's the staffing numbers you can see by building, the quarantines. For example, like Barrington has 8 staff members, T North had 8 staff members. So those are buildings we're watching. The middle school had a series of people. Some of these are teachers, some of these are paras, and different, or maybe office people. It just depends what the situation is. Here's some county data. We got this last week from the county. You can see this is confirmed cases by date. So you can see they're going along at a nice, at a level there. And then all of a sudden we went from about, I see a number 148 or 173. The next week went to 345, and the next week to 627. That's their concern, is we are continually jumping up. We're expecting this week to be at least at that level or higher, is what I was hearing, the next result to come out on Thursday. So right now they're still looking at that and concerned about that. That's the increase we're seeing. They broke down the data in schools for us. So this is all school data. The blue line is what they call isolations for students. And then the red line is isolations for staff. These are people either positive or waiting for a test result to come back. We had 37 across the Shawnee County that were staff. You can see how that's increased that last week. Same thing with the student numbers. And then the green is the total group altogether. Just shows even in schools we've had increases across the board this last week. By grade, they broke it down by grade across the entire Shawnee County. Pre-K is the bottom one. They've had no positive cases pre-K. Kindergarten through 6th grade, you can see how that's progressed by week. And then this last week it went from 5 up to 10. Now remember, pre-K K through 6, that would be 7 grade levels. So 10 among 7 grade levels is less than 1 a grade level right now across the county. 7th and 8th grade is the green line. You can see that's at 4, so that's 2 per grade level across the county. And then high school is the purple line. It jumped from 5 to 36. So that's, again, we know that high school is much like adults responding, and so we'd expect that number to be a little higher. Next piece of information there, Dr. Pizzino from the Shawnee County Health released an emergency order update from the local health office. A couple things in that order that we need to at least present here was the mass gathering rules have changed. They're reducing from, it used to be 25 for the mass gathering, and now they're reduced it to 10. 10 people. If they cannot social distance, they don't want more than 10 people in a group. And then for the large settings, you can see that the large settings was reduced, went too far, down to 100. It used to be 500 or 50% capacity. Now it's at 100 people or 50% capacity, whichever is the smaller of the two. So like for basketball games and things like that, we'd be limited to 100 participants. And we also, schools don't have to follow the 10 person in the classroom, but that's something to at least consider. Do we want to stay at that 10-person without social distancing or not. The next piece on that it's important to look at is they had here it is at the bottom, for remote working. And they said all employers shall evaluate whether their employees can feasibly work remotely, and to the extent reasonable shall take steps to enable such employees to work from home. Schools do have the ability to have employees work from home. As far as teachers, if needed, we'd have to go full remote to do that. They asked clarification in the news conference, and we asked Dr. Pizzino ourselves what the recommendation was for schools. And schools at this point, they're still being asked to look at their own data, make the best decision for that school, and they would support us on those decisions. They know that schools have been doing a good job, so they're asking each of us to look at where we are at personally and make decisions as far as this part of the order. Any questions on that public health order while we're looking at that?
Matt, I don't have any questions on the public health order, but I do have some questions about the process for quarantining. Can you remind us again what the communication process is for communicating with parents and staff on positive cases, especially now that we're, especially at the elementary level, now that we're cohorting?
Yeah, it might be easy if I just pull that up on my screen. Let me find that on our website. Give me a second here.
Okay.
There we are. On our district website, let me find usually right when you go to the screen, there it is a learning scenario. If you click on that one right there, it'll take you to our COVID pages. If you go to the one with the scorecard link, you'll see down here is information on how we communicate this to staff. And I am going to
Matt, if you click on the link below COVID communication, that'll bring up the big one if that's what you're looking for.
Perfect. Can you see that now?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here we are. It's kind of our communication plan for when we have positive cases. It talks about how we'll contact people. As far as people in the classroom, we're going to inform students and staff in the primary space that an individual has been tested. So if you have a positive within your classroom, we'll be notifying those people in that classroom that they have a positive test. We're specifically working with people that are considered close contacts, and they're the ones that are going to definitely get the most communication. We'll let them know they've been a close contact and if they're going to have to quarantine or not. Those people are always contacted every time if they're a close contact.
So if there's been a positive case in an elementary classroom, has everybody in the class been notified that there was a positive, or only those who were deemed close contacts?
Is my understanding that the class is being contacted on those. I had a discussion with one of our principals the other day about that, and they were contacting each person in their class because that was part of that primary space. Yes.
Okay. And so the principal's responsible for making that contact, or is somebody else doing it?
The building would make that contact on their own, whether the principal's doing that or an office assistant of some sort's doing that. I don't know who exactly, but somebody in that building is supposed to make the contact to those people.
Okay.
All right. Did I answer the question there?
Yeah, thank you.
Let me go back to my other screen then. The next piece I wanted to show is the kind last meeting we had. We approved as a district. Oops, there we are. To follow the county ordinances on mass gatherings. Now, at that time, the mass gathering limit was 500 people. As I noted earlier, they changed that. We did not know at that time they were going to change it. But just to remind the group that we did agree to follow those, the county's guidelines on mass gatherings at that time. Then the last piece I wanted to show you was the current scorecard for the county. You can see the county was at 22 this past week. A lot of red going on here. The week before they were 21. This week they're at 22. They grade out the hospital capacity. There was some concern that their numbers didn't truly reflect their concern with hospitals at that point. And so they left it gray. I think they're going to relook at their numbers on that and maybe make some changes in their scorecard. But that's why they left that grade out. But that was the only area that wasn't at the maximum at that point. So with that said, here's where we are right now in our scorecard. Our 2-week average for the county is 21.5, definitely in that uncontrolled category up there. Our number of cases definitely up from the past, which puts us in the yellow area. We have isolated cases, but right now we're successfully navigating those, and we're not seeing spread within the buildings because of those cases. Absenteeism for staff, again, we have some concern. We have some moderate absenteeism, but right now we're still able to meet our needs. So that puts us in the yellow there. So with those two, it kind of puts us in that orange area. I'm going to flip down to this second page. Orange puts us in that high area. We have the options of doing hybrid learning or doing full remote learning. Because of the information I'm showing for staff being comfortable at the middle school, at high school, which are our most concerning age group is the high school, because of their comfort level with that. But if you're feeling a need to look at options out there, I'm going to recommend that we go to a hybrid learning option. Here's kind of my recommendation for that. There is a transition time if we would go to hybrid. It takes a little bit of time to get our busing situation from going from full remote at the elementary to a hybrid situation at the elementary. So my recommendation would be to stay where we are this week on a current situation. The elementary would stay full in till the end of the week. High school and middle school would stay hybrid to the end of the week. I would recommend starting next week, which is our Thanksgiving week, to have Monday and Tuesday be full remote days. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we would go to Thanksgiving break. What that does for us, it really gives us a week plus 2 weekends, which is 9 days. It gives us 9 full days off. That'll give us some time to, if there's any concerns in the district as far as trying to get people back to work and different things like that, it'd help that situation some. Then once Thanksgiving gets over, and we come back, I would recommend that we start into hybrid learning for all grades pre-K through 12. And my suggestion would be we continue that through Christmas break and reevaluate that in our September or our December board meetings and see if we want to continue that after break or if we want to change that after the break. But so my suggestion would be, as I said, no change this week. Next week, do Monday and Tuesday full remote, do Thanksgiving break, and then come back with a hybrid learning.
Lauren?
Yeah, Renee.
So when we come back after Thanksgiving for K through 6 or pre-K through 6, we'll be back into the 4 days a week hybrid, or are we going to be doing 2 days, the two different
Hybrid is the 2 days on, 3 days off. So we'd split our groups in half. That would get us at the elementary back to full social distancing. The thought was with the county the way it is, it'd probably be best on our side to try to follow the social distancing with all grade levels. We've had good success at middle school and high school with that all along. Grade school, we had great success earlier with it, and then we've just continued that. It decreases the level of risk for staff members. They can better social distance with the kids in their rooms and things of that nature. So we would go after Thanksgiving into the 2 days on, 3 days off hybrid mode.
Okay, thank you.
And I understand this is it's not an easy decision, and I could fully understand if there's opinions out there to go other directions with this. So,
Erica, you unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I did. I think I'll just start off. I did type up a few comments because I'm sure you all know by now I'm not great at spur of the moment comments. First, I'm going to start off by saying that I believe the best place for kids is in school. Schools are a vital piece of our society. School is a safe place for our children. Excuse me, 1 minute. It's a safe place where our children are cared for and educated while our parents go to work. When school is removed from the larger picture, it creates a ripple effect that disrupts the entire community to its core. I also acknowledge the fact that here in our county and our surrounding counties, we're in a healthcare crisis. Our hospitals are full. A good friend of ours who's a physician shared some stories this weekend of critical patients being turned away from Stormont and KU because of lack of beds. The closest facility that would accept these patients were in Omaha, Nebraska, and Iowa. This is a truly scary situation, and when what we would call routine emergencies are unable to receive attention. I am not a doomsdayer. I am not a conspiracy theorist, and I have zero experience living through a pandemic. I am also not one to throw caution to the wind. A month ago, when I voted to bring all elementary kids back for 4 days, things were looking better. But this is no longer the case. And I want nothing more than for things to go back to normal and have my kids and your kids back in school where they belong. But the bottom line is that we are responsible for the safety and the well-being of both our students and our staff. And right now, in this moment, I don't think we are able to continue regular full capacity school in our elementary classrooms. There's no right answer. This is a matter of choosing the best of the worst options. I believe an emergency shutdown of our district would be the worst scenario. If we can make these difficult decisions before we are in a crisis situation in our district, we will be in a much better position to transition thoughtfully and deliberately. I am in support of Mr. Hirsch's proposal.
Thank you, Erica. Rosa, did I see you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, with the number of emails that I know we all received, is if parents decided to not send their children to school this week at the elementary levels or at any of the levels, I guess, would anybody be penalized for keeping their children home? And would accommodations be made for those students that did stay home and did remote this week?
I believe we would treat them much like a kid that's on quarantine right now. If the parent chose to have them at home for a short period of time like that, we would, they'd do remote learning just like a student that's on quarantine does remote learning. So no penalties.
This is Jason.
Yeah, Jason.
I believe the statements are right on the head. I agree that, I too agree that, the schools are the best places for our kids to be at. And if we can do it safely, by all means, we need to. However, even though we're doing a very good job of mitigating the risk now, things are getting to the point where, we could very easily get overwhelmed. So, yeah, I too support switching our elementary school students back to the hybrid plan and hope and pray that that we don't have to do anything more drastic.
Okay. I know for me, what a lot of the numbers on our scorecard don't show is what's going to happen when college students' siblings come home, because a lot of our colleges in the area are sending their students home for Thanksgiving break and they're going remote, they're going virtual for the rest of the semester. And so what's going to happen when those students come home, and what impact is that going to have on parents who are our staff or our students who are going to be in the buildings? Another concern that I have is right now, today we saw that Stormont is at max capacity. They reached it far quicker than they had anticipated. Right now, I know, there are cancer patients who are having to wait 6 hours to get a bed. If we had a bus full of students, God forbid, get in some kind of accident, where would our students go? If we had some kind of emergency in one of our buildings, who would respond? There was a story in the paper over the weekend that some of our fire stations have had to be shut down due to low staffing, either from positive cases or quarantining. So I have concerns about that. There hasn't been any word on how, our sheriff's department or TPD is doing, but, with the spread everywhere in our community, there's just such a high risk that it's going to affect our schools. It's going to affect our operations. And, I agree with you, Erica, and I agree with Jason that I want our students to be at school. And, I have long advocated that schools are the safest places for kids, even before we were having a pandemic. And over the weekend, I've been weighing both sides of the coin. And, or on the weekend, I thought that maybe this would be a good compromise by going remote for a couple of days before Thanksgiving. But then today, with the news about Stormont, and I've heard that, Saints, or what was formerly known as Saints, is reaching the same capacity. So we've got two major hospitals in the city that are reaching max capacity or are at max capacity. We don't have anywhere for anybody to go. And that takes time. And I've seen discussions on social media that people have no desire to make changes for their Thanksgiving plans. So even if we do go remote for 2 days in hopes of giving that full 9 days of some time to simmer down, I don't trust it. People are still going to have gatherings despite cautions being given. And then that's just going to roll into the next 3 weeks. So my preference would be that we go remote on November 23rd and we stay remote until we go to winter break. That aligns with what colleges are doing. That aligns with what a number of other school districts, not too far away, are doing. And I know that right now Auburn Washburn is currently meeting, and it's my understanding they're considering something very similar. And I think it's something that we should consider so that we can have consistency for the next 3 weeks with our students, and we can keep everybody safe. And we're doing our due diligence as members of this community and as a large employer of taking care of our employees, but also making sure that we have the resources we need in our community to keep everybody safe and healthy. Eric.
I agree. Thinking about this as well, I was agreeing with Matt and his recommendation, but my concerns are what we're going to be dealing with coming out of Thanksgiving and the gatherings. And I think, the university's made the decision early on, having the same concerns, what that would look like and having their students go remote to finish out the semester. We're talking about 3 weeks. And if we were to switch over to the remote, starting with the Monday, Tuesday, and allowing our administrators and everyone to retool so we could go that direction and then take that through the end of semester, that would really kind of follow with what Dr. Pizzino's recommending and trying to minimize our staff and allowing them to work remotely. And I think the more we could distance that is, I think, going to be better for everyone. And then I would love to see where we could be in a position after Christmas break to start back up in a hybrid mode. But I think if we don't, then we're going to be playing catch up and dealing with shortages of staff and a very vulnerable age group of everyone. That's my biggest concern.
Rosa, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I agree with that, with what you guys are saying. I am concerned though about finishing up the rest of the week, even in the classroom. And sorry, Lauren, you may have addressed that and my computer went down. So I caught the very end of what you were saying. So I apologize if I'm repeating what you said. But I am curious what happens, and Mr. Hirsch, this is probably more of a school bus issue. What happens if we decided tonight that tomorrow we go remote, or how does that look for the teachers to do that? Or is it something that we do on Thursday? With just the numbers that have increased and where we are, I feel like we're not doing our due diligence to make sure that everyone is safe this week. And next week is great, but what about this week?
We can do, like you said, we can go full remote at any time. There is the busing's not the big deal. The issue is for families to round up childcare on very short notice. They would need to make sure that could happen. The second thing is elementary teachers do not have remote lessons ready to go on short notice like that. So some of it would be them gearing up to be able to do a remote just with lessons. But could we do it quickly? It's much easier to go full remote than it is to go the other direction. You don't have to deal with busing, but probably the limitations would be the short notice on childcare, and then the short notice for teachers on lesson preparation for that next day.
And so to follow that up, if we kept the elementary school at, finishing out the week, but then middle school and high school, is that of a large concern to Mr. West and Mr. Urich? What are your thoughts, Mr. Hirsch?
I think the issue with middle school and high school is they are in hybrid right now. So they've had, their first group comes through on Monday and Tuesday. So they wouldn't have the opportunity to meet with the other group of kids if they don't meet Thursday and Friday. And then that kind of puts them off a little bit on some of their plans. Doable, sure, it's doable, but just for consistency, sometimes it's a little tougher.
Lauren?
Yes, Renee.
I would be inclined to support yours and Eric's and Rose's positions. We're ranked number 10 for the worst state in the nation. And I don't see that our numbers are going in a direction that is positive. Well, it's positive in the upwards rands, but not in the manner that we want it to. it's not a very fun decision to make. But I think it's the appropriate decision considering the times that we're in. And as we've been saying in our family, this coronavirus is kind of creeping in and it's getting closer and closer. And we know more and more people every day that we personally know that are being affected by it. And how each one of those people is going to respond to the virus, we don't know. So I would be inclined to support that particular decision.
One of the pieces I probably forgot on the transition, I don't know what kids have at school that parents would need to get them, but if we would make a quick turnaround, definitely at least an opportunity for each group of kids at the high school to get their stuff out of the buildings, middle school to get their stuff out of the buildings, elementary to get materials they need, I know would be a good step. But
so it looks like Scott Dial has just sent us all a message that says Auburn Washburn is going remote starting November 23rd, and pre-K through 2 and some SPED is going to be staying in school. So just to give you an idea of what Auburn Washburn's doing. And Rosa, I had some concerns about how we finish out this week as well, but I know one of the things that we've always discussed is trying to give people as much notice as possible. I mean, I know that everybody has known that there may be circumstances that come up, such as the one that we're in, where it's very much an emergency action needed. And so I'm on the fence on that of, I even asked Matt at one point today, can we just send everybody remote on Wednesday and not come back until later, and so I don't know how feasible that is or anything like that, but I've had the same thought, Rosa.
Well, that was that was why I'd asked the original question, was if parents decided that they could stay home, if anyone, if they would be penalized, if that was something that they felt was best for their family. Because I would hate for them to be, counted as absent, and they were feeling like that was what they needed to do for their families. So that was where that was coming from. It's a tough decision, and we all don't want to make this decision. And so it's sad that our numbers are going up, and there's no tracing and things like that. And so it's tough.
One thing to remember on our cases, we don't have any cases of in-class transmission. So everything that's coming to us right now is coming from the outside. And so if that helps to say, do we go all through the week and then start on Monday, or do we start sooner than that? That's probably a piece I think is important to at least look at.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, with the way cases are, I have a really hard time accepting that we don't have any transmission in our buildings. I think we all hope that we don't, and that our mitigation strategies truly are working. But I know that there have been students sent to school with siblings and parents positive or awaiting positive results at home that then became positive. So I think the contact tracing just isn't as effective right now because everybody's just so overwhelmed. And so I want to believe that there isn't transmission, but I don't fully trust that at this point. But I also understand that our teachers need a little bit of time to make sure that kids can get the materials that they need to go home. And I also trust that if parents wanted to keep their kids home, that they could make necessary arrangements to come pick up the materials that they needed if necessary.
How could I look for providing limited services for our SPED students?
Right now with remote, if we went remote, we do still have the option of serving groups of kids at different points. So if we needed to serve groups of SPED students or groups of other students, our current remote model from the way back to the start, our original plan, does have options for bringing groups of kids in if we need to do that.
I think that would be important.
Kristen, do you have any comments on that?
There's just logistic issues that we'd have to work out. And I think identifying which students that we think need to be on site and which are where it's safer to have students at home. So we just need to look at that and work out some logistics and identify which students we need to definitely have on site. So.
Okay.
Well, it'd be my recommendation to include that as a part of the plan.
I spent much of my weekend talking to teachers and staff, asking for their input. There were mixed opinions on the subject. For example, in the same conversation with 2 elementary school teachers, one elementary school teacher thought we should go remote or hybrid, and another thought we should stay in the current learning model. The elementary teacher who wants to stay in school says the younger kids need in-person learning and it's nearly impossible to teach them remotely. Should I just not send them back remote? As I remember back 6 months ago, I heard a statement from Hollywood actor Sean Penn comparing COVID-19 to an active shooter in schools. At the time, I thought the comments were vile, vulgar, and irresponsible. The gaslighting of fear and panic is not appropriate. Parents who send a child to school when they learn math and reading, interact with their friends and teachers is nowhere near the equivalent of an active shooter. So imagine my extreme disappointment at the November 2nd board meeting when a board member chose to defend their position with the Sean Penn analogy. I don't think there's a parent, teacher, or board member who doesn't take this pandemic seriously. We as a board should be able to exchange ideas without stoking fear and panic with our teachers, staff, students, and parents. The CDC reports that school-age children between 0 and 19 have an estimated 99.997% survival rate. CDC also reports adults 20 to 49 have a 99.98% survival and 50 to 69 99.5. Yes, there are other things we need to consider when evaluating the risk associated with COVID and the effect of it on our community. However, to say that thousands of Shawnee Heights parents who have looked at the data, evaluated the risk, and made a choice to send their children to school to be told that they are sending their kids into an active shooter situation is wrong. I support parents in their choice, remote or in person, even if it isn't my choice, in deciding what is best for their family. As a school district, we have put procedures in place to reduce the risk of the virus spreading within our schools. To this point, they have been effective. The questions we need to be asking are, 1, are our mitigation efforts that have proven to be successful to this point effective enough to hold up to a widespread community outbreak? 2, what do our local health officials have to say about the current learning environment? We should listen to and respect our local health leaders. 3, are traditional staff absences during this time of the year, along with COVID-19 related absences due to the community exposure, creating widespread staffing shortages that cannot be covered effectively across the district. Are there shortages of teachers, custodians, bus drivers due to the quarantine? With that being said, I trust Mr. Hirsch, his evaluation of the situation and his recommendation, with the expectation that as soon as our local numbers reduce and the county health officials remove the 10-person mass gathering group, their elementary students are brought back on site full time.
And one thing I can say about the mass gathering is if we move the elementary back to hybrid, that was also one of the thoughts, is we can follow that mass gathering even of 10, because you wouldn't have more than 10 people not social distancing. So we would be following even those guidelines at that point. So.
Okay.
Is it appropriate for a motion at this point?
It is.
I move that we accept the recommendation as put forth by Matt to move the elementary schools back to the hybrid learning model and keep the high school and the middle school on hybrid at this time.
Okay, I have a motion by Jason. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
I have a second by Erica. Are there any further comments or questions before we move to a roll call vote? Seeing none.
Lauren, I have a question. Sorry. So
No,
Jason,
go ahead.
can you please state that motion again? Or Sarah, can you restate the motion again, please?
Jason just made a motion to accept Mr. Hirsch's recommendation for hybrid learning, which would place students in school 2 days a week.
And we would also be remote on Monday and Tuesday of next week. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that would
My intent for the motion was to accept the recommendations as put forth by Matt.
Right, which is moving to remote for Monday and Tuesday of next week and returning from Thanksgiving break, which I believe is November 30th. Yeah, and the week of November 30th, we would go to the hybrid model.
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. We'll move to a roll call vote. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos.
Rosa, no.
Eric Deecher.
Eric, no.
Renee Hansen.
Renee, no.
Erica Price.
Erica, yes.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, I.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a no. That is a 3-4 and the motion fails. We can return to the action item if a substitute or a second motion would like to be made, or we can move on with no motion made.
I would like to make a motion that we move forward with continuing this week as scheduled and starting next Monday, Tuesday through Christmas break, we move to remote and visit and what the scenario would look like towards the end of December for the second semester. Well, actually, our first semester doesn't end until mid of January, but looking at how we could come back after Christmas break in a hybrid mode.
So Christmas break or winter break starts, or rather we go until December 18th. So your motion would be that beginning November 23rd, we would go remote and stay remote until December 18th, which is then when we go to winter break. And during our second board meeting in December, we will determine how we return in January. Is that correct?
That is correct. Additionally, we would look to see how we could incorporate the learning experience for SPED students following Dr. O'Brien's guidance.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion by Eric and a second by Renee. Are there any questions or comments before we move to a roll call vote?
I have a question.
Yes,
Is there
Eric.
a way to consider bringing our littles back in during that time, Eric? Like pre-K through 2, something similar to what Washburn has done, Auburn Washburn?
That was my intention, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think that those are the kids that need to be in the classroom. I mean, I think all kids need to be, but I think that group of children, it's crucial to be in the classroom, especially for parents. I mean,
and that pre-K through 3, even the third grade age, at some point, that fourth grade age is kind of the magic number where we're going to say parents got to find childcare or they need to go. Kids are going to have to stay home on their own. That third grade age is probably a little bit too young for that to occur. Fourth grade age is maybe, but more in line with, I think, what more people do. So I think that I agree with Erica, that K through 3 age.
I'm concerned though that we've got families that have kids in the K through 3 grade and also then the upper grades. And so you're going to be mixing, you're defeating the purpose when you do that. And unfortunately,
Yeah, my concern
yes,
with that.
I would love those kids to be in school. I would love them all to be in school, but I think at this crucial time, that's not the most important thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, and my concern too goes back to the transportation issue as well, because then they have to completely rebuild a transportation schedule to be able to get them back to school. And again, it completely defeats the purpose. I mean, if a family has people coming home or they're gathering for holidays or whatever, it's going to completely defeat the purpose.
So as a confirmation, we're talking about sending everybody back to full remote starting next week.
Yes.
High school, middle school, elementary.
Pre-K through 12.
Mr. Hirsch, how does that work for meals again? If that should happen, would students still be able to pick those up?
We would still be in school technically, even though we're remote. And so, yes, food service would still be functioning. We would have to evaluate how we would get meals out to people, but probably similar to what we did last year at the end of the year when we were doing deliveries to area neighborhoods and having people pick up.
Okay.
Even with the discussion, I don't want to modify my motion.
Your motion. Okay, the motion stands with the second from Renee, unless there are other questions.
For me,
Sorry, Sarah, what you cut out? What did you say?
I just need you to repeat the motion for me,
Okay.
please.
The motion would be that starting November 23rd, we would go into full remote pre-K through 12 and also provide services for groups of our bed program as identified by Dr. O'Brien's staff. So, yeah.
And we'd be in full remote until December 18th.
And then also we would address, we would look at the numbers at our second board meeting in December and make a determination how we will look coming out of the holiday break.
Mm-hmm. And we had a second from Renee. Okay, we will move to a roll call vote. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, no.
Rosa Cavazos.
Rosa, yes.
Eric Deecher.
Eric, yes.
Renee Hansen.
Renee, yes.
Erica Price.
Erica, no.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, no.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a yes for a 4-3 vote, and the motion passes.
I think everybody, I know that's a hard decision to make. I appreciate your work on that.
Thank you, Matt, for assembling all of that data and for answering all of the questions that I know we've all been emailing to you. So thank you very much. Moving on to item C, approve Shawnee County Schools legislative positions.
So last time we met, you approved the first draft of that legislative positions. All the districts re-looked at it and they just made a few small changes to it. So the draft you got today was just reflected those changes. Wasn't much change, a little bit of wording on the front page. And then they took out the section on standards and accountability. That's something they've had in there for a long time. So they just took that out so they could put in some more of the current things. So I just recommend approval for the new legislative agenda.
This is Jason, so moved.
Right, I've got a motion by Jason. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Renee. Are there any questions or comments before we move to a roll call vote? Seeing none. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos,
Rosa, yes.
Eric Deecher,
How to push the button. Eric's yes.
Renee Hansen,
Renee, yes.
Erica Price,
Erica, yes.
Jason Schultz,
Jason, I.
and Lauren Tice Miller is a yes for a 7-0 vote. All right, moving on to item D, approve facility use request Thunderbird Wrestling Club.
The Thunderbird Wrestling Club has been using our facilities for, I think as long as I can remember, for their junior wrestling club. They're asking, requesting again, knowing that we're at a time that's a lot of concern. I've asked them to come and talk to you. Sarah, are you here for the club? Sarah Michael, is that?
Yeah, it looks like she's here.
I can't hear your voice though, Sarah.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Are you here for the club?
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, sir.
All right. Can you go ahead and talk to them about some of the things you're thinking about doing to help with the safety there?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for letting me join tonight. And I, as a parent, listening to you guys talk through all your concerns this last half hour has been really heartening. So thank you guys for your thought and consideration on that. So we, last year we had less than 40 kids in our wrestling club. And I don't know how much you may or may not know about youth wrestling, but we, from a competition standpoint, kids are naturally divided up into two groups. Those are novice wrestlers who are beginners, and then our more experienced wrestlers we call an open. So our practices reflect our competition structure just by nature. So we already practice in two separate groups, our beginners and our experienced wrestlers. So that's a model we would plan to continue. So not yet knowing how many kids we're going to actually have wrestle with the club this year because we haven't opened our registration up. I think it's pretty fair to assume we'll be under the 40 mark again. And we would be able to separate those into, at minimum, two groups with our novice beginners wrestling for the first hour, and then our experienced open wrestlers wrestling the second half of practice. And we would, in years past, we have some overlap between the two practices, but obviously this year we would deem it prudent to have a clean break between the two groups, give us an opportunity to sanitize the wrestling mats. So we would try to keep the groups as separated as possible as they enter and leave the building. It's also just the nature of wrestling, just to speak to, there's not a lot of intermingling. I know a lot of people think about wrestling. It is a contact, close contact sport, but you naturally wrestle with kids your own age and size. So you do not often switch partners throughout practice or even throughout a season. You kind of naturally fall into wrestling with the same, kind of smaller group of kids in your age and size. So I know there are some concerns about social distancing and just the nature of the sport, but I think there's a lot to consider just organically that happens just with the nature of wrestling. And we would consider if it needed to be done, we're definitely willing to add a third night of practice and to even separate out even further if that was deemed necessary. We're going to ask our coaches to wear masks throughout practice. And, obviously bring our own water bottles, sanitized hands before and after practice. And then I think really just the key for us is keeping with the same partners as much as possible.
Matt, I have a question. Given that we have just voted to go remote until December 18th, would it be more appropriate to table this request until our second meeting in December? Because I was just looking at our back to school plan, and it says that, if we go remote, then all of our school buildings are closed. So do we need to table this and consider it again in December for when we determine what we're going to do when we return?
You're reading that the buildings are closed when we're remote? I'm not.
Yeah, in the back to school plan, it said that on each of the pages, when we go full remote, it says that buildings are closed. I mean, is that not the case?
Well, obviously, we're violating that if we're going to allow SPED students to
Right.
come back in. So
Okay.
we also have in the plan, I'm pretty sure it says that sports are still following CASHA rulings, if I remember right. So, but I'd have to look at I have not. Let me pull it up.
Okay.
So while they're looking that up, when is it that your club is looking to first utilize or wanting to utilize the facility?
We were hoping to start practice the week after Thanksgiving, which would be in line with our typical schedule from years past.
So Matt, I'm looking on it looks like page 5 for instruction purposes. It says that students and staff, only invited small groups of students and staff will be permitted in the building as allowed by the local department. So I'm guessing we could have groups of 10 in that situation, but I thought I just saw that in terms of facility use that the buildings would be.
Yeah, I was just looking at page 2. We kind of had that general overview of building use. It said minimal use of school buildings was over there in the remote column. So there's somewhere in here we said buildings are closed down. I wasn't aware that there's several spots I know that say there is some use of buildings. So
Here's where I was looking on page 13, large group gatherings. So I guess that wouldn't necessarily apply to the wrestling group, but it does say school buildings are closed. But then underneath it says abide by the maximum number of people allowed. So I guess the header that I would quickly glanced at is misleading.
sure.
So they're closed with an asterisk.
I think the idea was not to have some of the large gatherings, but to follow the Shawnee County guidelines on whatever the large gathering was.
Okay. I guess the mass gathering changes that the county just issued, they're in effect until December 14th, right?
December 14th is when that closes out.
Okay.
This is Jason. I would move for approval pending the ability to comply with appropriate guidelines.
So would that be limiting them to 10?
To meet the guidelines, you couldn't have 10 in a group. You could have 2 different groups of 10 spread out so the groups weren't in contact with each other, but you could have 10 in each limited group.
Well, all right, I'll amend my motion to just straight move approval.
Okay, I've got a motion by Jason. Do I have a second?
Oh, second.
I have a second by Rocky. Are there any questions or comments before we move to a roll call vote?
Yeah, can you repeat the number of students that this is again? I'm sorry. That would be participating?
I believe she said in the past they'd had 40, but they could divide that into 2 or 3 groups.
So would we be recommending that they divide that into those 3 groups? Or are we just allowing Could that be part of the motion, or are they going to be at their own discretion to have the groups however they see fit?
This is Jason. Okay. This
Hi,
is
Jason.
Jason. I would personally suggest leaving it to their discretion and the school, and hopefully they and we as the school can come to an appropriate compromise. Hence the reason why I removed my stipulation, just went move for approval.
Does that answer your question, Rosa?
I guess it's still, I mean, he just made the motion to approve, but it's still broadly open for interpretation. So
You would feel much more comfortable what I'm reading is that you would feel much more comfortable if they would follow the county guidelines as far as keeping their groups. So they may have, let's say they have 30 wrestlers that want to participate this year, that you would want them to, during the practices, limit their groups to groups of 10 or less.
Yeah.
As an example, to meet the county guidelines.
If this were approved by our our plan as it is, it says they have to follow county guidelines. And so by approval default, they would have to follow the guidelines of our district and the county.
And that was my question, was I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. So thank you.
And I just want to mention that I'm not going to be supporting this motion. I don't think that we should be encouraging any kind of gathering whatsoever at this time, especially if it's not academics and education related. I understand the needs for the special services for our special education students and those deemed necessary, but I think outside groups and activities, we shouldn't be supporting those at this time. So I will not be supporting this motion. Are there any other questions or comments regarding this before we move to a roll call vote? Seeing none. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos.
Ugh. This is a tough one. Rosa, no.
Eric Dieter.
Eric, no.
Renee Hansen.
Renee Hansen, unfortunately, I am going to say no.
Erica Price.
Erica, no.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, yes.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a no on a 5-2 vote. The motion fails.
That's 2-5, right?
2-5. Yep, I said it backwards. Sorry. So we can go back to the action item or we can move on. If we wanted to just table this until our second December meeting so that they have an opportunity to do this once we return, depending on what the learning scenario is.
Can I make the motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Erica.
I'd like to make the motion to table the approval of the facilities request by the Thunderbird Wrestling Club for our December. It's not, whatever the second meeting in December is.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have a calendar in front of me.
No, that's fine.
Rosa seconds.
We've got a second by Rosa. Are there any questions or comments before we move to a roll call vote? Seeing none. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos.
Rosa, yes.
Eric Dieter.
Eric, yes.
Renee Hansen.
Renee, yes.
Erica Price.
Erica, yes.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, aye.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a yes for a 7-0 vote. We will bring this back up in December. All right, moving on to item E, approved sale of buses.
Yeah, every year we buy some new buses and move some of the older fleet out. This year we kept some just to make sure we had plenty in case we had any extra needs. I think at this point we're feeling like we've got what we need. And so Dwayne would like to start the sale of a couple of those buses. So he's just requesting that we be able to sell a few of the buses that were rotating out of our fleet. And we recommend approval.
This is Erica, so moved.
Okay, I've got a motion by Erica. Do I have a second?
Jason seconds.
Got a second by Jason. If there aren't any questions or comments, we'll move to a roll call vote. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos.
Rosa, yes.
Eric Deecher.
Eric, yes.
Renee Hansen.
Renee, yes.
Erica Price.
Erica, yes.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, I.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a yes for a 7-0 vote. Moving on to approve pay application to Schneider Electric.
So this is our pay application to Snyder Electric in the amount of $50,236.62 for work done to date on the energy saving project. HTK has approved the work and we're recommending approval for that.
Lauren, I move approval.
Okay, I've got a motion by Renee. Do I have a second?
Eric, second.
I have a second by Eric. If there aren't any questions or comments, seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos.
Rosa, yes.
Eric Deecher.
Eric, yes.
Renee Hansen.
Renee, yes.
Erica Price.
Erica, yes.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, I.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a yes for a 7-0 vote. All right, that concludes our action items. We'll move on to discussion items, superintendent's report.
Today, we officially posted the superintendent position. It was posted on the KASB website and amongst other places. We will probably do some sort of posting on our site, but all applications will be directed to the KASB website to do those. To give you a little bit of an update on where we're at on the process, right now we're selecting people for our focus groups. I believe an email was sent out this morning for the parent community group. We sent out a Google form for people that were interested in that group. Rosa and Erica were selected a couple meetings ago, I believe, to select that group. So once we get names in, they will be selecting that group. The principals are helping with the other group selections for those focus groups. And those focus groups will meet on the 9th. Right now, we have them scheduled for the auditorium on the 9th. But we'll be looking at that if we want to continue that in the auditorium or if we're going to go with a more remote setting. I believe we may end up having to do that. So based on where we're at with the situation. So we'll be working on that. They'll be sending a survey out to all patrons and staff and about for that same idea to develop characteristics for the superintendent. That'll be going out on November 30th. And then we'll have a special board meeting on December 9th, where you guys will get all the information and you'll sit down with the rep from KASB and Sue will help you come up with the final list of characteristics. So that's kind of where we're at. Applications will be due January 5th. So that gives them a couple months to get their applications in for that time. Erica, Jason, and myself attended a webinar the other day from KASB titled Intro to Equity. It was a kind of a good introduction to what equity is and how we might kind of initially look at that in our district. And so that gives us a little bit of a start on that. I would like to thank Tammy Beaver for all the work she's done with the close contacts and contact tracing in our district. She has headed that up. The numbers increase has caused us to find her some supports, and now all the nurses in our district are helping with that process. And so it just helps spread that out and keep some of that work off of her, which was quite an ordeal here for the last couple of weeks. So I appreciate all the work they've been doing. The KASB conference is December 2nd through the 4th. I believe Lauren has signed up, but if anybody else wants to sign up for that conference, please let me know and I can get you signed up. And remember, it's all virtual if you're interested in going. We've been doing capital outlay walkthroughs. We did all our walkthroughs, and the principals have now been working with Joe and Blair to get cost estimates, and they're getting that information to Sarah, who's compiling that. So we're kind of in that process right now of collecting all that information and getting a compiled list there. Last thing is with that mass gathering changes, according to our policy, if I'm reading it correctly, right now sports can still participate as long as we follow Acacia guidelines. But we would have to follow the mass gathering ordinances on that of 100 people. So that's where we are as far as sports and mass gatherings right now. That's all the information I have.
Okay. We will move on to questions, comments from board members. Yeah, Eric.
Again, I'd like to, Jennifer, thank you to your staff for providing the nice appreciation gifts for us. Janet and Nort stopped by the house with, you said a para was traveling with her, but it is greatly appreciated for their work doing that. I know that having to venture out, they were expecting us to be there. So taking this upon them, it is greatly appreciated. So thank you so much.
It was a pleasant surprise.
Very nice.
It's well deserved. Thank you for all of your hard work.
Rosa.
Mr. Hirsch, with sports, is that something that we will be able to discuss a little bit more? I don't know when practices start and how that's going to look with us going remote next week, and what precautions do we need to take? Or I'm sure Cody has been thinking of everything outside of the box. So I just didn't know if you could you give us some more detail about what sports and where they are, I guess, with tryouts? I'm guessing that's happening right now. So what does that look like?
Mr. West, I'll let you, do you know where we're at the high school when practices start there? I'm not familiar with the dates.
Practices started today. The traditional, at least for practices started today for some sports. Bowling will not start yet for a while. Traditionally, basketball will start and they'll kind of all practice together for the first 2 or 3 days for tryouts. Then after that, they'll divide their practices up by different teams. Typically, the JV and varsity would be together, and then the freshmen would kind of be in a location of their own, so they can divide into a couple of cohorts, sometimes even within the same gym. Wrestling also practiced again today. I don't know the exact rotation, but I know that they have. They're practicing again at the same time, but they're rotating their groups, so they're not all mixed together. How they have that accomplished, I'm not 100% sure, but again, they're not all mixed together at one time either. So there's at least 2, if not 3 different cohort groups within the wrestling group. Bowling won't start for a while yet. If I remember right, they'll have some tryouts maybe in early December. And then the season itself doesn't get kicked off until right after the new year, calendar year starts.
Looks like, I think swimming is also going right now, if I understand
right.
right.
Started as well too, and I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, that would be boys swimming, and I'm not 100% sure what the scenario is there. I know that we have some lane spaces that are available at one of the venues there. Cheer and dance have videotaped and are sending in their entries into the state championships. The first year for dance, it's the 4th year for cheerleaders. So that those 2 groups are still functioning right now as well too. Although to what extent, I don't know if they'll take a little bit of a break now that the competitions have ended, or if they'll jump right into it. But those are the main organizations right now that are going. Extracurricular debate is as well. Scholars Bowl is as well. Their tournaments are all remote currently.
And then the middle school, we are right in the middle of a basketball season, are we not, Mr. Urick?
Yes, that's right. We're playing basketball and everything seems to be going well. See, Mr. Mickens is on the call here. He might have something to add. Maybe not.
And will those numbers be limited to attendance as well in the middle school?
Yes, we'll follow all county guidelines regarding attendance, and Mr. Mickens works very hard to make sure that attendance expectations are communicated to our patrons and the patrons of visiting teams.
And where are we with the drug testing? I know I brought that question up a few months ago, and I'm just curious if that has been discussed any further.
We have at the high school, we had asked for and collected some random names for a test. That was about the same time when the county went red. And so we decided not to utilize that list. I still have that list. And if we, depending on the circumstances, it doesn't look like it's going to happen, we would utilize the same list if we were able to test anytime before the new year. If we wait until after the calendar year, then I would probably throw that away and ask for a new list to be created. But at this point in time, we've purposefully held off on doing that. With students just in school 1 day a week, we didn't want to utilize too much of their class time. And there are some occasions, not a lot, but there are some occasions, depending on what the circumstances are, when a person could be sitting in a seat for right at or a little bit longer than 10 minutes. And we didn't want a close contact to be an issue at all for students or for those collecting the samples.
Lauren.
Yeah. Renee.
Again, I just wanted to thank everyone in administrative, teaching, support roles for their flexibility, their creativity, their versatility. This is not an easy time. And I just really appreciate the calm, warm spirits that come across here. And I know that's what our students are also getting. I appreciate the love and care that you're giving to the students in the best way that we can under the circumstances that we all find ourselves. Thank you again.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I just want to thank all of you on the board for the good discussions. I know this has not been an easy decision, and I know that this is not an ideal situation for any of us, and that extends beyond the board. I have been thinking about this a lot, and it's not just about what's happening inside of our school buildings, it's also what's happening in our community. And there's a number of factors that come into play here. So I just ask that everybody has patience as we move forward with all of this, and that everybody please follow the county guidelines and help us get these numbers down, help our community, help our healthcare workers and our firefighters and everybody who's on the front line. They're all exhausted. And we need our numbers to go down so we can all in our community be safe, because I don't want to lose anybody from the Shawnee Heights family. So thank you everybody for your civility in our discussions and for your careful thinking and consideration of all the factors that come into play. If there are no further comments or questions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion by Renee and a second by Eric. And we'll do this quickly with a roll call vote. Rocky Buznitz.
Rocky, yes.
Rosa Cavazos.
Rosa, yes.
Eric Deecher.
Eric, yes.
Renee Hansen.
Renee, yes.
Erica Price.
Erica, yes.
Jason Schultz.
Jason, aye.
And Lauren Tice Miller is a yes.